With cracked lips, he whispered one shocking request, one that silenced the entire room. "Bring her here, the janitor, the black girl who cleans these floors every night. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. I have missed you all. Missed all the experiences we've had together. It's been a rough ride as we're currently battling some technical issues, but trust me, we're getting everything back and running. So stick around. I need your support on YouTube now more than ever. Thank you specially for sticking around to this very moment. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click the subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. The hospital corridor smelled of antiseptic and silence. Machines beeped faintly behind closed doors, nurses whispered, and the world seemed to slow down around one particular room on the top floor. Inside, Alexander Knight, the billionaire CEO whose name had built skyscrapers, owned airlines, and controlled empires, lay frail and broken. For decades, people had only known him as untouchable, ruthless in the boardroom, commanding in presence, a man who shaped the future with a single decision. But tonight, as the cold wind rattled the hospital windows, his once iron hands trembled against the sheets. His face, usually stern and unreadable, was now pale, softened by regret and time slipping through his fingers. Doctors stood at the edge of the room, whispering about how the night might be his last. Lawyers rushed in and out, waiting for his signature, desperate to secure fortunes and contracts. Family members lingered, arguing over inheritance, property, and control. But Alexander, he didn't care for any of it anymore. With his cracked lips, he whispered one shocking request, one that silenced the entire room. "Bring her here, the janitor, the black girl who cleans these floors every night." The lawyer blinked. His sons frowned. Even his wife froze, confused. Out of everyone he could ask for in his final hours, his children, his board of directors, his countless wealthy friends, he wanted her. A young woman most of them didn't even know by name, someone they'd seen pushing a mop bucket when the world was asleep. Why, in the last breath of his empire, would a billionaire CEO call for a janitor who had no connection to his wealth, his bloodline, or his power? And yet, his voice grew sharper, filled with more urgency than it had in years. "Find her. Tonight. Before it's too late." Everyone exchanged looks of disbelief. But deep in Alexander's fading eyes, there was something no one had seen in him for decades, a desperate longing. A truth buried for years that only this young woman seemed to hold the key to. And when she arrived, wiping her hands nervously on her uniform, unaware of the storm she was walking into, what happened next would change everything. Her name was Amara Johnson, a 24-year-old black woman who carried the weight of life on her shoulders every single day. By day, she was invisible to most, a janitor in the towering skyscrapers of the city, scrubbing marble floors that would never reflect her dreams, cleaning offices filled with people who barely noticed her. By night, she hurried back to her tiny apartment on the edge of town, where unpaid bills sat stacked on the table and her little brother, Malik, waited for her with wide, tired eyes. Amara's mother had passed away when she was just 14, and her father, he had walked out long before that. Responsibility had been forced into her hands too young, and ever since, survival was the only rhythm of her life. While her peers chased college degrees, parties, and freedom, Amara scrubbed toilets, polished mirrors, and pushed a mop through silence. But despite the exhaustion, there was something extraordinary about her, a quiet dignity. Even when the executives brushed past her without a glance, she would smile softly, hum an old gospel tune her mother used to sing, and whisper to herself, "Better days will come." Yet nothing in her ordinary routine could have prepared her for that night. She had just finished her shift at the hospital, her sneakers squeaking faintly against the tiled floor. With her bucket pushed aside, she tied her braids back and exhaled deeply, ready to leave. That was when two sharply dressed men in suits appeared in front of her, their expressions unreadable. "Miss Johnson," one of them asked. She froze, her heart skipping. Nobody ever addressed her like that. "Yes, that's me," she said cautiously. "You need to come with us. Now." Her first instinct was fear. Had something happened to Malik? Was she in trouble? But then, when they mentioned the name Alexander Knight, her confusion deepened. "The billionaire CEO?" she asked, half laughing at the absurdity. "Yes," the man replied firmly. "He's requesting to see you. Immediately." Amara blinked. That has to be a mistake. He doesn't even know me. But within the hour, she was standing outside his hospital room, her palms damp, her uniform wrinkled from the long shift. She felt every pair of wealthy, judgmental eyes in the corridor pierce through her. His children scowled, the lawyers whispered, the nurses exchanged puzzled glances. And then a voice, raspy, weak, but urgent, called from inside. "Let her in." The door opened, and Amara stepped into a world that seemed to freeze around her. There on the bed was Alexander Knight, the man whose face had graced magazines, whose decisions shaped nations, whose wealth could buy entire cities. Yet now he looked at her not with arrogance, but with something startlingly human. Recognition. Tears welled in his fading eyes as he whispered, "Amara, you came." Her chest tightened. She had no idea how this man knew her name. But one thing was certain, this was no mistake. If you were Amara, standing there in front of a billionaire you had never met, who somehow knew your name, what would be the first thing you'd ask him? Share it in the comments. I really want to hear your thoughts. The room felt heavy with silence as Amara stepped closer to the bed. She could hear the shallow rhythm of Alexander Knight's breathing, the occasional beep from the monitor, and the murmurs of his children outside the door. Amara gripped her hands together. "Sir, I think there must be some mistake. You know my name, but I've never met you before." But Alexander's lips curled into the faintest smile, pained, weak, but filled with recognition. "You look just like her," he whispered. Amara frowned. "Like who?" His eyes glistened with tears. "Like your mother." Her chest tightened. Her mother? Nobody here knew her mother. She had passed away years ago, and she was nothing more than a memory held together by old photographs and faint lullabies. Before she could ask another question, Alexander motioned for her to sit. She hesitated, then slowly lowered herself into the chair by his bedside. "I don't have much time left," he said, each word strained, "but I couldn't leave this world without telling you the truth." Amara's heartbeat quickened. What truth? Outside the room, his children shifted impatiently, muttering under their breath. They thought she was just a distraction, an unnecessary interruption to their inheritance. But Alexander raised his trembling hand, reaching for hers. She let him take it, even though the touch of his cold, frail fingers sent shivers through her. "Your mother, Grace. I knew her. Long before this empire, long before all the noise of wealth and power." His voice cracked. "She was the only woman who ever reminded me what it meant to be human." Amara gasped softly. Her mother? Grace Johnson? The woman who raised her with hymns and late-night prayers? The woman who died working 2 jobs to keep her children alive? Alexander's eyes brimmed with sorrow. "I should have been there. I should have done more. And for years I stayed silent. Out of shame, out of fear, out of cowardice. But I can't leave this world carrying that sin." Amara felt her throat tighten. She wanted to speak, but the weight of his words pressed down too heavily. Finally, he said it, the words that shook the air in the room. "Amara, you are my daughter." Her breath caught. The walls of the room seemed to close in, the beeping of the monitor echoing louder in her ears. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. That can't be true." But Alexander's grip tightened weakly around her hand, his eyes begging for her to believe him. "I called for you because you deserve to know everything, and because my last wish is to make things right with you." Her world spun. In a single moment, Everything she thought she knew about her life shattered. She wasn't just a janitor struggling to survive. She wasn't just invisible in the eyes of the world. She was the hidden daughter of one of the richest men in the country. And everyone outside that door would do anything to keep her from claiming her place. Family, imagine being Amara, standing there, being told by a dying billionaire that you are his daughter. Would you believe him? Or would you think it's just the ramblings of a man near death? Drop your honest feelings in the comments. Amara's chest heaved as the words echoed in her mind, "You are my daughter." Her mother had never spoken of this. Never once mentioned the name Alexander Knight. All she remembered was her mother working tirelessly, whispering prayers late at night, always telling her, "Don't let this world make you small, Amara. You're meant for more than you know." Could this be what she meant? Before Amara could ask more, the door burst open. A tall man in a tailored navy suit stormed in, his jaw sharp, his expression burning with anger. This was Richard Knight, Alexander's eldest son. "What is this nonsense, father?" Richard's voice cut like glass. "We're wasting precious time. Why is she here?" His eyes flicked to Amara with disdain, as though she were nothing more than dirt tracked into the room. Alexander's frail voice grew firm, surprising everyone. "Because she belongs here." The lawyers exchanged glances. The nurse stiffened. Amara felt her heart race as Richard's glare deepened. "This is ridiculous," Richard snapped. "She's a janitor. She has no business being in this room, much less in this family." Amara's lips trembled, but she refused to lower her gaze. For years she had been overlooked, ignored, and silenced. But this was different. This time she had been called. Alexander coughed violently, and the doctor rushed to check the monitors. His time was running out. Between shallow breaths, he motioned weakly toward the drawer beside his bed. "Amara, take it." With trembling fingers, she pulled the drawer open. Inside was a sealed envelope, thick with documents. On the front, in bold letters, it read, "For Amara Johnson." Her hands shook as she lifted it. But before she could open it, Richard snatched it from her. "This doesn't belong to you," he hissed. "Yes, it does," Alexander croaked, his voice hoarse but commanding. "Give it to her." For a moment, Richard froze, torn between obeying his father and protecting his inheritance. The silence stretched painfully until the lawyer cleared his throat. "Mr. Knight, perhaps this should be discussed after." "Now." Alexander's voice thundered, a burst of strength that shocked everyone. "She has a right to know." Amara clutched the envelope to her chest as Richard reluctantly released it, his eyes burning holes into her. The room fell into silence again, but in Amara's heart, chaos raged. What could be inside? Proof of his claim? A will? A confession? Her mind screamed with questions. If Alexander had loved her mother, why had he stayed silent? Why had Grace struggled all those years while he built empires? And why now, why only in his dying moments, was he reaching out to her? And then, another thought, darker, colder, clawed its way into her mind. If Richard was this furious already, what would the rest of his family do when they learned she might be heir to part of Alexander Knight's empire? She looked at the dying man before her, his hand trembling as he tried to reach for hers again. "Amara," he whispered, "don't let them erase you. You deserve to know who you are." Her pulse quickened. For the first time in her life, she wasn't invisible anymore. But visibility in this family came with danger. Because the Knights weren't about to let a janitor rise from the shadows and rewrite their legacy. "Family, let me ask you, if you were Amara, would you open that envelope right there in front of everyone? Or would you hide it away until later, knowing these people might do anything to stop you? Let me know in the comments." Amara sat frozen in the chair, the envelope trembling in her hands. Every eye in the room was on her, the greedy stares of Alexander's family, the calculating gaze of the lawyers, the hopeful yet fading eyes of Alexander himself. Her instincts screamed to run, to hide the envelope, to open it only when she was safe. But another voice, her mother's voice, echoed in her heart, "Don't be afraid of truth, Amara. Truth is your shield." With a deep breath, she broke the seal. The papers inside slid out, birth certificates, letters, photographs, evidence that Alexander had been telling the truth. Her mother, Grace Johnson, had worked as a secretary in one of Alexander's early firms, long before his empire exploded. The letters revealed a secret relationship filled with love, passion, and promises that were later broken when Alexander walked away to marry a wealthy heiress for the sake of his career. Tears blurred Amara's vision as she read her mother's handwriting. "Alexander, I cannot raise this child alone, but if you choose your empire over us, I will do what I must. Just know she will grow up strong, with or without you." Amara's breath hitched. This wasn't just a dying man's rambling, this was proof. She really was his daughter. But then came the twist. At the bottom of the stack was a newer document, dated only months ago. It was a revised will. Alexander Knight had signed over not just a portion of his estate, but the majority, to Amara Johnson. Gasps filled the room. Richard lunged forward, snatching the papers from her hand. "This is a forgery," he spat. But the lawyer shook his head gravely. "I witnessed his signature myself." Chaos erupted. Voices clashed, lawyers scrambled, Alexander's children shouted in disbelief. Amara's hands trembled as she tried to process it all. She hadn't asked for this. She didn't even want his billions. All she had ever wanted was enough to pay rent, to feed Malik, to live without fear of debt collectors knocking at her door. But suddenly, the world saw her differently. Not as a janitor. Not as invisible, but as the heir to an empire worth billions. And that was the moment Richard's voice cut through the noise, venomous and sharp. "She is not one of us. I don't care what lies you spin, Father. I will never let her take what's ours." The words sliced through Amara like a blade. For the first time, she realized just how dangerous this was going to be. Because money this powerful didn't just divide families. It destroyed them. And now, every secret, every betrayal, every sin of the past was rising to the surface, all because she dared to exist. Family, imagine this was you, suddenly holding proof that you were heir to a billionaire's empire. Would you fight for what's rightfully yours, or walk away to protect your peace? Let me know in the comments. I'm curious to hear your hearts on this. The shouting in the hospital room carried into the corridor, drawing curious stares from nurses and patients alike. But Amara barely heard any of it. Her pulse roared in her ears as she clutched the remaining papers to her chest. Richard's face twisted with fury. "You think you can walk in here with a mop and bucket and suddenly own everything we've built? You're nothing." Alexander tried to raise his voice, but the effort brought on another violent coughing fit. The doctor rushed in, urging everyone to quiet down. But Richard's anger only grew, his words like poison. "You don't belong here. You'll never belong here. Do you hear me?" Amara's throat tightened, her body frozen. For years, she had endured humiliation in silence. Bosses who ignored her, customers who disrespected her, classmates who looked down on her. But this was different. This wasn't about being overlooked. This was about being erased. Tears burned her eyes as she turned to Alexander. "Why now?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "Why wait until you're dying to tell me the truth? Why let my mother struggle? Why let us starve while you lived like a king?" The question sliced through the air like a blade. Everyone froze. Alexander's eyes brimmed with tears, his face etched with regret. "Because I was a coward," he rasped. "I let greed own me. I thought, if I buried the past, it would disappear. But it never did. It haunted me every day." His confession shook her, but it didn't heal the wound. It only deepened the ache of everything she and her mother had lost. Richard sneered. "Pathetic. You believe his lies? He's delirious. He doesn't even know what he's saying." But Amara knew what she had seen. Her mother's letters. Her own birth certificate with Alexander's signature. The will signed only months ago. It was undeniable. Still, the weight of it all crushed her. She didn't want this fight. She didn't want billions. She only wanted answers. And yet, the moment she stepped out of that room, whispers followed her like shadows. Lawyers pulled her aside, asking about her intentions. Reporters circled outside the hospital, cameras ready. Members of the Knight family glared at her like a thief who had broken into their castle. By the time she made it home that night, her legs shook with exhaustion. Malik met her at the door, his eyes wide with concern. "What happened, Amara? Why are you crying?" She pulled him into a hug, clutching him tightly. "Our lives, they'll never be the same." But in her heart, fear outweighed hope. Because for the first time, she realized the truth. Being Alexander Knight's daughter didn't make her powerful. It made her a target. And with every breath her father lost, her chances of finding justice seemed to fade with him. Family, let's pause here. If you were Amara, would you walk away to protect yourself and Malik, or would you stand and fight for your mother's honor, even if it meant putting yourself in danger? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I really want to know what you would do. The days blurred together like gray clouds. Between the hospital visits, the constant harassment from Alexander's family, and the media camping outside her apartment, Amara felt like her life was crumbling. One night, after Malik had finally fallen asleep, she sat alone on the worn couch, holding the old letters from her mother. She traced the faded ink with trembling fingers, her heart aching with the memory of the woman who had sacrificed everything for her. For the first time since the chaos began, Amara whispered into the quiet, "Mama, what should I do? How do I fight people this powerful?" Silence answered her. But then her eyes fell on one line in her mother's letter, the one she had read 100 times but never truly heard. "Amara, no matter what they say, remember this. Your worth is not in their approval or their riches. It's in the truth of who you are. Never bow your head. Never forget your name." The words struck her like lightning. She realized she had been carrying fear, shame, and doubt like chains. She had been walking into those hospital rooms as a janitor begging for scraps. But she wasn't just that anymore. She was Alexander Knight's daughter. More importantly, she was Margaret's daughter. A woman who had taught her resilience, dignity, and courage. Her tears dried. Something steadied inside her. The next morning, she walked into the hospital, not with trembling hands, but with her head high. Malik walked beside her, holding her hand tightly. For the first time, she didn't feel small. When Richard tried to block her path, sneering as always, Amara met his eyes with calm fire. "Move," she said simply. And to his shock, he did. Inside the room, Alexander's breaths were weaker, but his eyes lit up when he saw her. "Amara," he whispered. She leaned close, holding his frail hand. "I forgive you," she said softly, surprising even herself. "Not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to carry your mistakes as my chains." Tears slid down Alexander's cheeks. "You're stronger than I ever was." At that moment, Amara realized something important. Whether the will was honored or torn apart in court didn't define her. She had already inherited the only thing that truly mattered: courage, dignity, and the truth of who she was. And that truth was unshakable. Family, think about this. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean weakness. Sometimes, it's the only way to free yourself from pain. Do you think Amara was right to forgive Alexander, or should she have held on to her anger? Share your honest thoughts in the comments. The hospital room was quiet that evening, the city lights glowing faintly through the blinds. Machines beeped steadily, but everyone present could feel the end approaching. Amara sat by Alexander's bedside, holding his hand. Richard and the other family members hovered in the corner, their expressions stiff with resentment and fear. The lawyers were nearby, silent witnesses to history being written in real time. Alexander's breaths grew shallow. With what strength he had left, he turned his head toward Amara. "My daughter," his voice was weak but clear. Promise me you'll never let them take away your light. Live, not in bitterness, but in truth." Amara's eyes filled with tears. She nodded, gripping his hand tighter. "I promise." His lips curved into the faintest smile. And with that, Alexander Knight, the billionaire titan, took his final breath. The room fell into a stunned silence. The machines wailed as doctors rushed in, but Amara knew. His fight was over. Richard broke the silence with a roar. "This isn't over. She doesn't belong here. She won't get a cent." His voice cracked, desperation bleeding through the rage. But before he could go further, one of the lawyers stepped forward, holding up a sealed envelope. "Mr. Knight recorded a final video testimony 2 weeks ago. His wishes are legally binding." Gasps rippled through the room. The lawyer pressed play on a tablet, and Alexander's face appeared, frail but resolute. His voice carried the weight of a man determined to set things right. "To my family and to the world, I confess the truth I should have spoken long ago. Amara is my daughter. The daughter I abandoned. She is not a stranger. She is my blood. And it is my will that she inherit what I once denied her. To Amara, and to Malik, I leave not only my fortune but my name. Treat her as you would treat me." The room erupted. Richard's face went pale, fury battling with helplessness. Reporters who had gathered outside were soon given copies of the video, and by morning, every headline carried the story. Billionaire CEO's last confession, secret daughter revealed. Amara didn't seek the spotlight. She didn't chase after the billions. What mattered most was that her mother's name had been honored at last. The world now knew the truth, that she was never a mistake, never invisible. Weeks later, standing at Alexander's graveside with Malik beside her, Amara whispered, "Rest now. I'll carry the name, not for the wealth, but for the dignity Mama always wanted us to have." Malik squeezed her hand. "You're not just cleaning up floors anymore, sis. You're cleaning up history." Amara smiled through her tears. And in that moment she knew she hadn't just inherited wealth. She had inherited freedom. Family, what an emotional journey. From a janitor cleaning floors to a daughter finding her true worth, Amara's story teaches us that truth always rises, no matter how long it takes. Tell me, what's the biggest lesson you're taking from this story today? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for watching this story to the end, my beautiful family. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.